This video is brought to you by Dell Gaming. Don't just play, game.
And there's more where that came from. This video has been played, captured, edited and released on the new Dell Inspiron 5675. This is from their new Ryzen powered desktop PC lineup that will be available for the upcoming Black Friday. It's geared towards gaming, but with its powerful 8-core processor and SSD hard drive combo, the PC I used was more than capable of handling anything I threw at it, be it 3D design, music creation or video editing. With it, I'm going to investigate the hidden, mysterious, but very important world of video game optimisation. Better graphics are often associated with more details, more lens flare, more explosions. But often there are better, smarter tricks that can be used instead. CSGO's SAS models recently got a beautiful makeover to bring them up to today's standards. But you may be surprised to know that, in terms of complexity, they saw an increase of 7%. Only 7% more polygons to make a character model that looks a lot more than 7% better, complete with far more dangly things attached to him. This is what being smart can achieve. Of course, this character model is just a small example. Let's see what it can achieve if applied to an entire game. Here's Crysis, a game that I'm sure you're all aware of. And here's the Inspiron's first challenge, the DVD. Fortunately, the front panel doesn't just feature modern connections, card readers and 4 USB slots, but it also comes prepared for older technology with a DVD rewriter. These days you seldom need it, but it does save you from having to MacGyver up a complex solution when you do. Oh, and there's more film here as well. Crysis needs no introduction. Now 10 years old, its graphics are still relevant because of the forward-thinking approach the studio adopted. They didn't build it like a game. Rather, they got a pre-rendered movie-like video called Core X and strived to make Crysis look as good as that. They matched it within a year, and the end result was a game that looked even better. But there was a drawback. Can it run Crysis? Can it run Crysis? Can it run Crysis? This game ran terribly. It became a dank meme to ask this at every opportunity. The joke soon got old and downvoted, and yet the question continued to be asked. Of course, here I am on modern hardware running it on Quad HD, full settings, plus anti-aliasing. So I think it's safe to say that it can run Crysis. Oh look, more film. What they did for a sequel was a little more unexpected. Rather than to try and improve the graphics further, what they did instead was to keep the graphics the same, but to make it so that everybody could finally play it on their PCs. Think the SAS model, but for a whole game. This was particularly evident on lower settings, where it only cut extra details. It retained the important bits, such as the overall look and feel, and best of all, it managed all of this with excellent frame rates. Honestly, I struggle to spot what's missing from these settings unless given a direct side-by-side comparison. In contrast to this, the original game looked hilariously bad at low settings. It was flat, unfinished and unloved. Amusingly, for the second game they changed the names of the graphics levels to reflect the improvements, naming the lowest setting High and then having to come up with new names for the rest of them. Thanks to their smart work, even the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 could now handle this game, albeit at the lowest high settings. I'm always happy when I hear that a game runs well on consoles, because as a PC user, I'm selfishly thinking of all the ways I can use my PC's additional power to have a superior experience. Crysis 2 and its increased optimisation lets me run it like Crysis, but with higher frame rates, or at a higher resolution, or with improved detail settings. And with a modern system, like this, I can have the best of all worlds. Sadly, the response to Crysis 2 wasn't positive. Whereas people complained the original didn't run well, they now said that the sequel had been dumbed down for consoles. Admittedly, they had aggressively optimised this game. The most unforgivable of these changes was to the level design, which had replaced the original's open-endedness with smaller, more linear paths that ran a lot better. Detail-wise, they were probably better. There was just less of it. What is sadly overlooked is the stuff that Crysis 2 did better. I believe there were two things. Firstly, the levels were carefully constructed from lots of high quality props and models,
rather than being bumpy ground with stuff sprinkled on top of it. And secondly, the lighting made everything look nicer, even if it wasn't any more detailed. Everything visually pops, whereas sometimes the first game feels like a missed opportunity. Even if the first game showed more stuff or had more detail, it would still appear less pleasing than the second game, which sported prettier art direction and lighting. And later with the second game, they rolled out an update that introduced some cutting-edge features. With these, it was certainly technically superior to the original, though the damage had already been done, and sadly, this patch lost quite a bit of the optimization in the process. Funnily enough, for a series known for cutting-edge graphics, neither of these games properly supported the latest technology. Whereas Crysis 2's DirectX 11 patch came out after release, Crysis 1's DirectX 10 features could be run in DirectX 9 with just a simple config file tweak. 10 years ago I did this and enjoyed playing through the game at 10 frames a second. But never fear, because Crytek finally delivered with Crysis 3, a game with modern tech, superb visuals and enough optimization for everybody to be able to run it. A happy ending to the trilogy. These 3 Crysis games tell a fascinating story of graphical improvement and optimization. And since this, more advancements have been made. Once again, I thank consoles for most of these, since their limited processing power forces developers to create these new technologies. Us with powerful PCs then get the benefit. Rainbow Six Siege, for example, uses checkerboard rendering. This means it skips every other pixel, effectively only calculating half the number, then uses magic to fill in the gaps. The result on modern hardware means much better frame rates. You can either choose to keep that, or move to a higher, better resolution and still get the same performance as you would have without it. Good news for everybody. The Inspiron was happily running this game at maximum settings at QHD without a problem. Level of detail has been used in games forever, replacing stuff with lower quality models when they're a long way away from the player to speed things up. This technology helps scenery to look and run well at any distance, so as you'd imagine is particularly important in open-ended games, like Skyrim. A more fun example to show this in is the previous game, Oblivion, which would switch trees to creepy, movie 2D pictures when it thinks you won't notice. It was acceptable back then, but running at 4K now, you can obviously see the limitations. Tessellation is sort of the same, but sort of the opposite, where it generates more details as you get closer. If the effect is used properly, then you won't see the changes taking place. But this fantastic demonstration lets you mess about with different values, ranging from no tessellation at all to quite a lot. If we zoom into this distant cliff, you should be able to see more and more detail being added to it as we approach. And now to repeat it again, only zoomed up this time so that you can see the changes taking place. This is just one of the many ways that modern titles can extract as much quality for as little performance impact as they can. Titanfall 2 and Shadow of War both use dynamic resolution scaling, where the game is continually adjusting its resolution to give you the best visual quality while remaining smooth to play. This scales for all computers, and the chances are when the resolution is at its lowest during demanding scenes, you won't even notice because you'll be too busy dodging the explosions and all that extra detail that's being thrown in your face. Technologies such as Vulkan and DirectX 12 remove overhead, meaning that more of your computer's performance can be used to power games rather than being held up elsewhere. New games such as Tomb Raider, Doom and Deus Ex are already adopting these new standards. And it's not just the games and developers that are improving their optimization. Hardware is as well. Newer graphics card generations come with more powerful hardware, as well as being better at using what they've got. For example, the Geforce 1060 included in this Inspiron features 4th generation compression. This comparison shows the improvement. The purple spots indicate the areas of the gaming image that it can compress. The more, the better. A lot of it was already covered in the older generation, but you can still see the further improvements made with the latest 4th gen technology. Even if everything else about this card remained the same, this advancement would still lead to better performance than with older cards. The Inspiron also sports AMD's Ryzen 1700X processor. This is a very powerful chip that can handle a lot more than just games. Right now, most modern titles only use a fraction of its full potential. But as everything else advances, I expect to see the Ryzen 1700X and its 16 threads to continue performing well. It's a sort of future-proofing that's nice to have. Oh look, more film. So thank you to Dell for providing the hardware that has powered everything in this video. I found some nice extras too. It's a desktop PC with built-in Wi-Fi, and its Max Audio Pro control panel was fun to mess about in, letting me up the bass or surround sound for games and the like. Click the link in this video's description to see the Inspiron gaming lineup, and be sure to look out for Dell's Black Friday offers from the 23rd of November on dell.co.uk.